everybody. Thank you. Welcome to Build Weekend Watch, the greatest TV and movie roundup show that airs on a digital platform owned by a larger telecommunications company and shot in a street-level studio in downtown New York City. Niche, I know, but still the greatest. Thank you so much. I am your host, Ricky Camilleri, and joining me today, we have two people so much smarter than me. We have writer for Yahoo Entertainment, Gwynne Watkins, and Buzzfeed's critic and culture writer, Alison Willmore, and clap for them, please. Hello.
Hi, Ricky.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being here. Are you having a good week?
I don't know if I would say that.
Yeah, it's been tough out there for us media folk.
Yeah, it's not
right?
a great month for digital media.
No.
But here we are.
But here we are on the best digital media entertainment roundup show shot in a street-level studio in downtown New York City. First up, we are going to be talking about Dan Gilroy's Velvet Buzzsaw. The Nightcrawler writer-director teamed up with Jake Gyllenhaal once again and created this new Netflix thriller. If for some reason you like movies about creepy art coming to life and attacking people, specifically critics who somehow have more money than the artists they're writing about, then this is the film for you. Here's the trailer.
As I research these, I'm starting to think
There's a disgust for the world of money.
I spent decades in a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane.
There is some sort of power. Some spirit. It's connected to his art. Something truly goddamn strange is going on.
I love me some Jake Gyllenhaal. I love the cast of this movie. I did not love this movie, unfortunately. But I'll let the two of you talk about it first.
All right. Oh, I loved this movie. I think I'm the only one. Yeah, I thought it's so weird. It's so bonkers. It's Dan Gilroy, who did Nightcrawler, which I also loved, and sort of like this gonzo art world satire, but like also kind of a Final Destination movie. Right. And it's so crazy. And it's got an amazing cast. I just so thoroughly enjoyed just watching the insanity, and also that it actually I thought had something to say about art, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's an attempt to do like a really dark satire of the art world, the way that Nightcrawler does a really dark satire of the kind of like whatever you can get news footage world. I didn't like it as much as Nightcrawler. I thought it was like sillier, and definitely it's fun though. I thought like it was a good time. Like a lot of movies that get made for Netflix now, I was like, sometimes this feels like a collection of future gifts, you know?
I agree. I mean, my thing with the satire of the art world in Velvet Buzzsaw is the art world is so easy to satire, and I feel like I've seen it so many times. Like, someone posted a clip of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia that was just Danny DeVito in like a dumb wig walking around a gallery going, love it, hate it, which I was like, and they wrote Velvet Buzzsaw on it, and I was like, that's kind of what the first hour of Velvet Buzzsaw is these kind of like cliche take on the art world, but everybody in it is beautiful and fun to watch. And then when it became a horror movie, I want a horror movie, and I didn't think the death scenes, save for Toni Collette, spoiler alert, were all that great or original. So it didn't really have the sort of like expectation for each world that it was trying to create. It didn't meet any of those for me. Yeah.
I mean, I thought that, I think you're right. I think it kind of sets up these characters and this idea of this artist who made all of this art that's like cursed in some way. And it's like, it sort of is a critique of commercial art and the idea of this whole world of money surrounding something that should be pure. But I don't know if it really gets its ideas in order. That said, everyone gets to wear really fabulous outfits. Mm-hmm. Everyone gets to have very strange hair, which is delightful. And I like Jake Gyllenhaal playing weird. I think he seems to like playing weird too. And I think there's something about him getting allowed to like lean into like these kind of like oddball characters that really brings out the best for him in it as an actor.
I will see any movie about Jake Gyllenhaal losing his mind. It's one of my favorite movie themes.
I really enjoyed Jake Gyllenhaal's, I think this is just going to be a Jake Gyllenhaal appreciation 15 minutes, to be honest, even though there's some other wonderful people in the cast. But this character that he's doing of someone specifically our age, that has a lot of, that is very affluent and has every kind of option at their fingertips but can't really make a choice in regards to his sexuality, which I thought was really fascinating character to depict. I don't think I know people like that, and I have never seen them depicted that well on screen before. And I think some people will watch and say, well, it's kind of a cliche depiction, and I would say, no, those are the people that I know. It's actually very, very spot on. I think the other thing with Velvet Buzzsaw for me is I've heard from filmmakers that when they sign on to Netflix, Netflix doesn't give notes. They just let them make it. And so many of the movies that I've seen by like good filmmakers working with Netflix, I think someone should have given you notes. It's like notes could have really brought this movie together. I think of this. I think of Jeremy Saulnier's film, which we saw that movie together, right?
We did. Yeah.
And that was something that was kind of like, a great studio executive could have come into this and been like, hey, these are some great scenes. Here's how we could pull this story together and give this a little more shape.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, and also, like, I don't know, Netflix's model is like things come and go so quickly. You know, you have this moment of maybe getting promotion, but like, this is a movie that you can kind of see another version of maybe getting put out by A24. It would have gotten treated differently. It would have gotten a big campaign. It would have been maybe a slightly different movie. But it is interesting to see this, like, where you're like, it's like an okay version. And it's going to go out on Netflix. And it's okay for things to be okay on Netflix because, like, the kind of bar to watching is much lower. It's there. It's on your devices already.
I don't know. I appreciate how weird this movie is. And because there was no studio interference, I like that Dan Gilroy was like, I'm just going to make a fucked up movie about art killing people, and I'm going to get every good actor in Hollywood to be in it. Like, but I think people who watch this movie on Netflix are going to love it or completely hate it. Like, I think if it gets an audience, it'll be really polarizing.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. Jake Gyllenhaal's so wonderful, and even if you hate it, you can just kind of appreciate him. And then you also have Toni Collette and Rene Russo looking incredible. And honestly, I brought this up during the trailer. Can we just talk about how unbelievably hot Rene Russo is for her age? I mean, she's always been, but she just ages incredibly well.
Yeah, and she gets to play as like a former punk rocker turned like art mogul, like cutthroat art mogul in this. And I was like, hey, I like that. That's a good role for you. Yeah.
Yeah, she should be getting a lot more work, not just from her husband.
Well, apparently she doesn't want it.
Really?
Yeah, I've interviewed her and she basically said, like, I don't have to work and I have a garden. And I have a child, and that's who I like to spend my time with. So she really only works for him. And then I think she made one other movie that a year ago that was like, you know, an old person movie where she was like in a relationship with like, I don't know, I think it starred like Morgan Freeman and maybe like Alan Arkin and one other old person.
You're just making this up.
No, I'm really not. And I think it was like, I can't remember who made it. God, it's like it takes place at like a nursing home or like, you know, an old folks home, and she's like dating one of them. And it was a movie that clearly they shot for like 3 hours a day, and they did not care how good the takes were. They just sort of pumped it out. And I think that she doesn't really want to have to work hard with the exception of being on her husband's movies.
You know, and if you've got someone who actually gives you roles like this that are like sexy and that are evil and that are like offer you a lot of material to work with, then I can see how when you go out and like look at the other offerings that, you know, seem to be getting put forward for actresses over, let's say, 35, then I can see it being like, if I don't have to do this, then why not just choose not to?
If I don't have to show up and play the mom on the phone or like the wife on the phone being like, Sully, are you going down?
Right, or like the mom to someone who's like only 12 years younger than you, you know, the kind of like traditional Hollywood math, yeah.
The movie was called Just Getting Started. Thanks, guys.
I'll look that up.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next movie. Out in theaters today is the new action movie starring Gina Rodriguez. It's called Miss Bala. It's based on the 2011 Mexican film of the same name. In it, Rodriguez plays a woman who infiltrates a Mexican drug cartel to save her best friend and also to do all of the drugs. Let's take a look.
See it in your face.
Forget your friend. No one's coming to save you.
Whether or not you survive, it's entirely up to you.
You're gonna be my queen. You gotta learn how to use one of these. A bala, a bullet. A bala settles everything.
Hit me like
Ever since you showed up, the police have been one step ahead.
I almost gave this movie a 10 out of 10 while I was watching it because I thought the lead bad guy who we saw there was Hot Mugshot Guy. And I was so excited. If nobody knows who Hot Mugshot Guy is, he's a super hot guy who got arrested, took a mugshot, and everyone was like, that guy's really hot, and he got a male modeling contract.
Yeah.
I thought that the lead bad guy was him, and I was like, I can't believe they put hot mugshot guy in a movie, and he's good. That's so great. And then the movie ended, and it was like not him, and I was like, oh, okay, 4 out of 10. It's totally fine. It's like a totally fine B movie. I had no problems with it because I wasn't thinking that hard while I was watching it. And yeah, I thought that's really all that I can say about Miss Bala remake, which is more than I can say for like most Hollywood remakes.
I mean, this movie is a remake of a 2011, I think, Mexican film that was a kind of art house film, and it very much was about this character who was just in the wrong place at the wrong time and just got thrown into a nightmare where she has no control at all. Like the whole story, she's just kind of swept along and has almost no agency. And I do feel like there's something profoundly wacky in the way that the remake is like, we're gonna keep most of that, but now she's like a strong female character. So at a certain point, she's gonna be walking around in like a ball gown holding an Uzi. It was like, maybe like not quite carrying through the themes of like innocent people, you know, and as the kind of like being swept up into cartel violence, whether they have any contact, you know, with it or not.
Where does this movie fit into the piece that you wrote last year about girl power and your feelings about girl power in Hollywood movies?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is like a classic example of where they're like we have a very basic idea of what like empowerment looks like, and it usually means like you end up like shooting people, right? Like
your boobs look really good while you're doing it.
And she does look amazing when she
the Joel Silver version of empowerment, right?
I mean, I don't want to spoil the ending of this movie, but I do think the ending of this movie is like a kind of hilarious reworking of this idea of like, you know, how can we make this movie seem empowering, like a Hollywood executive idea of like what is empowering, and it's really different from the way the original movie ends. And I do think that like I don't think a remake has to follow faithfully, but I do think that like if you have a movie that is about kind of like innocent people and how to live with cartel violence, I do feel like I'm not sure what this movie is about.
Oh, this is not that. This movie's not about anything. This movie is it's a B action movie. It took whatever the original Miss Bala was about and stripped it of any sort of meaning at all and just put Gina Rodriguez at the center and made her an action hero. Fine, go for it. You know, it's the end of January. If you can make that entertaining and unoffensive, okay, that's fine by me. I will say though, by stripping it of meaning, there are certain elements. This is PG-13, I think, right?
Yeah.
There are certain elements of this where you're like, that is a really dark world that you're in. How can you just gloss over that? Like her friend gets abducted and essentially becomes a sex slave. She becomes trafficked into sex slavery. And it's just kind of like, okay. Like it's just a piece of the movie. And you're like, no, that is really dark. She's been getting assaulted for like the past 5 days while this movie has been taking place. And Gina Rodriguez is like, hi, I love you. Oh my God, let's go. Like, what?
I mean, the whole movie has this undercurrent of like the potential of sexualized violence to it, right? Like she's this woman who's been kidnapped by a bunch of cartel members very randomly.
And when they go to the cartel members, like a glass house apartment on the ranch.
It looks
whatever
amazing, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
Laurel Canyon apartment.
It does. It is definitely very Laurel Canyon. Yeah, it's the most beautiful looking cartel hideout I've seen in a movie.
Very well designed.
Yeah,
cartel architects are.
But there's definitely this like sense that the movie is like on the verge of all of this really dark stuff that it just can't, you know, engage with, and so it just kind of like wriggles around in order to just avoid, you know, dealing with these themes.
Which makes you sort of start questioning, it sort of goes back to it made me think of the final girls in a horror movie, right? And how the absolute final girl has to be a virgin. She can't have had any sort of like real sexual trauma or sexuality attached to her. And that's the only way that she can survive or to have, you know, an audience at that time when those movies were being made on her side, at least according to the executives that were pushing those movies forward. And this kind of has that as well. There's no way certain things can happen to Gina Rodriguez for the audience of this movie, according to these executives, to go along with it, which it's not really for me to decide, is that less or more offensive than actually portraying the reality of this situation. Like, what is more important, the fantasy of a fun action movie or the reality of what would happen to a woman who was kidnapped by cartel members?
Yeah, I don't think there's a good answer to that. I also don't think that this movie would have been prepared. It gives any sign that it could deal sensitively with any of this stuff. So I think it's probably for the better that it doesn't.
Do you think one of those signs that it can't deal sensitively with this is that all of the cartel members are male models?
They're beautiful.
They're
they look
like
amazing.
intensely hot male models with ripped 6-pack abs that are like hanging out by the pool and holding guns, and you're like, where did you find these guys? It's like you couldn't cast one like normal looking cartel member.
They have like very cool hair too. Oh yeah. I don't know. It's like a really kind of funny like envisioning of what a cartel must look like. Yeah.
A bunch of personal trainers who are just moonlighting as cartel members. Okay, in honor of this Miss Bala remake, the three of us are going to talk about some of our favorite remade foreign films, because often Hollywood decides to remake a classic or just a good foreign film, and even more often they suck. But we've chosen three of our favorites. You're going first, Gwen.
Yes, I picked The Departed, which is a remake of a movie I have not seen in a long time, but I believe it's called Infernal Affairs. Is that right? Yes. Korean movie?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. All right.
That's so funny. We were all going to get it wrong. I was going to say Japan. Thank God you're here.
That is very embarrassing. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I liked that movie when it came out. It's this great kind of twisty cop thriller, and I thought Martin Scorsese did something really, really interesting in creating all these emotional layers that weren't in the original, even though it was a very solid kind of like fun crime thriller. And it had some of that, but I love The Departed. I love how deep it goes into these people and their worlds, and how everybody has a sympathetic side.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
The Departed is one of those great movies where it's like, it's a big, fun pop movie, but at the same time, when you sit down to watch it, and like almost, I think 95% of Scorsese's movies, they're the most watchable movies that exist. And The Departed has the thing where it's like, every time it could stop, and that could be enough for who that character is or what this scene is going to be, there's one layer that he goes further with. And I think Matt Damon's sexuality is one of those things that you just do not expect that movie to tap into or even care about. And it's just this fascinating layer that the movie has.
Yeah, it has a good Mark Wahlberg performance. You don't get those very often.
Side of Fear.
And it's, I think of it as like a fun movie to watch, but whenever I actually watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is wrenching.
Is it Alec Baldwin as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, he and Mark Wahlberg are like have such a great kind of like background banter.
World needs more bartenders.
Yeah, exactly. So profane. I think there's one part where he's like cheers about like Homeland Security acts, and like what they get to do.
Martin Sheen gets thrown off a building and blows up when he hits the ground.
It's perfectly accurate. Of course.
That's exactly what would happen.
What happens. It's a great movie. And I think it's also like, sometimes when you watch, often, most of foreign language remakes are not good. But like when you watch this movie, you're like, oh, it didn't just be like, how can we make strip the original movie for parts, and then it like really interprets it for like an American setting.
Directorially as well, because Scorsese is such a fan of all movies and such a student of all of them, that there is still an element of this. He doesn't remove that kind of Hong Kong aspect of it as well. There are parts of it that you can feel him sort of absorbing how that director made Infernal Affairs and adding some of that style. Tangentially, though, I want to say The Departed is the only movie that Scorsese won Best Director for. And as we're going into the Oscars, we were talking about this last week, and that it's not really his best movie. It's maybe not even the movie that year. I don't remember what it was that deserved Best Director. But are we okay with a direct like Spike Lee winning this year, even though Black Klansman might not be the best directed movie? Because he didn't win for Do the Right Thing or didn't win for Malcolm X?
It's not the win I would be most mad about.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, I feel like, if the Oscars can't go back and change history, so they might as well try this imperfect way of kind of like making up for past mistakes.
I like the making up for past mistakes of the Oscars. I think it's one of my favorite, maybe my favorite part.
And I do think Black Klansman is good.
Yeah,
it's not
so
Do the
do
Right
I.
Thing, but it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who would you be most mad about winning Best Director?
Bryan Singer, probably.
He's not nominated.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah,
He'll be there.
Will he really?
I don't know. Like, Peter Farrelly, maybe. Yeah. No, he wasn't nominated.
I
Okay,
don't think he was
so
nominated. I can't
we
honestly
dodged that
remember
bullet.
who was nominated.
I can't either. All blending together.
Allison, what is your remake?
I picked, I think, maybe like a weird one, but it's Solaris, the remake of the Tarkovsky film. The Tarkovsky film is this like, it's considered like a stone cold sci-fi classic. And so the idea of like remaking it is really just like, I think people already were like objecting when Steven Soderbergh did it. But I feel like and I love the original film, but it's like this very kind of like removed, aloof, intellectual, impenetrable maybe take on sci-fi. And Soderbergh, you know, he remade it with George Clooney and Natasha McElhone, and like I think it's a lot shorter, but at the same time, I feel like it kind of captures and like. It made me understand the original more as well. Like, I think it's kind of a more accessible in to the ideas that are in both movies. And it felt like it accompanied the original, like in this whole idea of like going to visit this planet where people's like memories become embodied, like your ex or your father, these people who are gone in your lives, seem to be kind of coming back. And all of the characters try and deal with what that means. And I feel like the remake like made me think about the original in a different way, and I feel like that's rare that a movie actually kind of feels like it accompanies what it's remaking and kind of like is in conversation with it.
It's so interesting because to have Soderbergh remake Tarkovsky, because Soderbergh in many ways has been called cold and called impenetrable, but he's kind of the pop version of cold and impenetrable, whereas Tarkovsky is like, you know, not that. He is just cold and impenetrable. So sort of take those two elements and put them, as you said, like you said, into a smaller, shorter film. You still have that element of like a Tarkovsky appreciator.
Yeah, and also like Soderbergh can do sexy, you know, he's that like Out of Sight is like,
Out of Sight,
it's a great movie. And I think that like there is like an element of that comes through in Solaris, even though it's like a much obviously more complicated and dark relationship of a character and his late wife who suddenly appears back in his life in some form. I think it kind of it uses that part of Soderbergh's like kind of talents really well.
My pick is William Friedkin's Sorcerer, which is a remake of the French film Wages of Fear, which I forget which year Wages of Fear came out, but it was the 30s or 40s. It's an old French film, and Sorcerer, he had all of this clout in the industry because of The Exorcist and because of the success of The French Connection. Basically took all of that and all of his studio's money, and he said, I'm going to make a movie about a bunch of guys trying to get a truck of dynamite across a bridge. And I'm going to go to a real bridge that's falling apart, and we're going to try to shoot these guys getting a truck across it. And it's jaw-dropping. It's really dangerous. The filmmaking was really dangerous. People almost died, I think. I don't know if somebody actually did, but it was really close. He was getting sued. The thing went way over budget. It basically destroyed his career for years afterwards because it bombed when it came out, and they went way over time and way over budget. But as you're watching it, if you ever get the chance to see it in the theater, if you live in New York, they show it every now and then. It's jaw-dropping because you can't believe that he actually tried to do this and basically wanted to document the possible deaths of actors and crew members. And also Tangerine Dream does the score, and for about 10 or 15 years, they were doing potentially the best movie scores that there were. And I love it. Give it a shot if you can. Do you guys have anything?
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a remake actually until you mentioned it. Yeah.
The original is fantastic as well, but the remake is just like, they really went for it. He watched the original and was like, let's really do that.
It's got that also you can tell it was like a really gonzo production, and I feel like sometimes that it shines through in a way where you just can't replicate that. You're like, oh, this is really reckless and irresponsible.
I mean, there's a period of time, and I don't want to assume anything about Friedkin, but there's a period of time, and I think it's like Sorcerer to Live and Die in LA, where his movies kind of feel like cocaine. Where someone was clearly we're gonna do this, and everyone was like, okay, man, go ahead, that sounds crazy, and they just sort of let him do it. And then you watch Sorcerer, and you're just like, yeah, it's just it's like a blockbuster movie without CGI right now.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what's so fun about it. Let's move on. Switching over to TV. While in the middle of shooting the upcoming movie, Wonder Woman movie, Patty Jenkins and Chris Pine filmed the TNT limited series I Am the Night. It's a noir drama loosely linked to the Black Dahlia murder. Was it worth delaying the highly anticipated DC blockbuster? We'll get to that, but first, check out the trailer.
Who are you?
I'm a reporter.
I'm nobody.
You sure about that?
You gotta remember where you are. Who runs this city? Some stories don't want to be told.
You remember the Black Dahlia murder?
This girl, she's the key.
Can you dig it?
Okay.
Can you dig it?
Your grandfather is a very dangerous man. Things been going on. Bad things.
I really wanted to love this. I
Me too.
love the Black Dahlia story, as horrific as it is. I don't love that it happened, but it's such wonderful like Hollywood myth, and noir has been built off of it for so many years. I think most perfectly James Ellroy did it with his book. Brian De Palma tried to do it with a movie. In late De Palma fashion, it was not great. And this is totally living in the James Ellroy space of LA Confidential and the Black Dahlia. Unfortunately, I just don't think it holds up. It's missing a certain momentum and it's missing a certain structure and feels like it was made kind of fast, which it was.
Yeah, it does. I really wanted to love it too. I love old Hollywood. I love film noir. You know, I like Chris Pine and Patty Jenkins, but yeah, it did not hold my interest at all. It's just so many, you know, we're in this prestige TV glut where we're seeing so many projects like this that have great casts and, you know, really solid production values, but they're often a little too long and they're often treading over the same territory and...
Treading over the same territory as other projects of their own material, of their own territory. I mean, there are scenes in the first episode of this that I think are like 10 minutes long. And you're like... Oh, you're spacing this out. You're trying to get to the next thing. I mean, there's a scene with a wonderful actress, Golden Brooks, I think her name is, maybe, who plays the mother, who delivers a monologue about her daughter, who she is and where she comes from, that is maybe 10 minutes long. And it is unnecessary, and it goes on forever, and it strands this actress out in the cold, and she's clearly trying to figure out what to do and what to do with her body and how to do this scene. It's not her fault. It's a monologue that goes nowhere and lasts too long.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when I've just been struggling through True Detective season 3, where I've just had that problem where I'm like, this is so, you know, like clearly they spared no expense. You have Mahershala Ali, who's like one of the greatest actors working today, and I'm just like, I feel like this is so much work to watch it, and I don't feel like TV should feel like a chore. But I think it's that same effect of like where you're like, this shouldn't be this long. Like you're just kind of like treading water to like get to a full season, to something that feels like a full season, but you don't actually have the material there. And like maybe, I mean, TV is
maybe
like
make the movie.
I know. I was gonna say maybe movies can come back a bit to the forefront because sometimes it's good to have just like 2 hours.
Yeah, not everything has to be a 10-hour movie.
I mean, she had this story for a number of years and was pitching it, and I know that. In doing press, she has said no one was interested in doing a miniseries so many years ago, so that's why I couldn't get it made. And I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know, like you were a filmmaker, you made movies. I bet you were pitching this as a movie because there is a movie's worth of material here.
There are things that make sense for these long miniseries. Watchmen makes sense for a long miniseries. Like this story, it felt like everything was just stretched. And also, there's so many stories about girls getting sexually assaulted by their dads. Like, you really are going to have to justify it to me if you're going to give me another one of those. Like, I just don't want to watch another mystery story about that.
But then at the same time, was that even that much of this story? So like clearly they're trying to throw as many elements into the pot as possible that the most important elements get kind of tossed aside and then are brought back again. It's hard to track what this is trying to say and who it's actually about at times because it's really, everything is just kind of thrown together.
And the Black Dahlia case feels kind of weirdly tangential to the story too, even though that's how they promoted it. Yeah, it's very weird.
But Chris Pine has a line in the first episode that I will hold on to forever, which is, "You want to dance, Froggy? Pick a lily pad and jump." Which I
did love that line.
I saw him say that line, and when he came in, I was like, "I'm sorry that you had to do that line." But also, you did it incredibly well.
It was a solid delivery.
Solid delivery of what I imagine to be one of the most difficult lines an actor has ever had to deliver. Like, looked at it on the page and went, "Oh, fuck you guys." Like,
I haven't watched enough of this to know. Is he good in this?
Yeah,
he's a movie star.
He's
he carries it, but he plays like a strung-out detective who just had
fairly cliche
addicted character. And kind of like Nicole Kidman in Destroyer, except I liked that. So
I will say the one thing that he does is that he is given a number of lines like the one I just said, and he finds this way of playing the character that is different than most, I think, cliche noir performances, which is that they are always polished and the person is always like, when they have those great lines, they're delivered in this kind of like, I'm the wittiest person in the room and I know how to do this, whereas his delivery of it, he may have just been trying to remember his lines. But to me, it felt like he was trying to portray a character who didn't have these things on the tip of his tongue all the time. And so he sort of like struggles through them and stumbles through these really great, or these really kind of cliche noir lines, which give them, I think, a different layer of meaning.
Yeah, he's not trying to be Sam Spade, which I appreciated. But yeah, Sharp Objects, similar kind of story, which I also loved. I just kept thinking of things I liked more that had similar
elements. You liked Sharp
elements.
Objects, though.
I did. I thought Sharp Objects
Sharp
was
Objects was another instance for me where I was like, movie. You have enough material here for a movie.
Yeah, I love the relationships in that
Yeah,
series.
I also just I liked the town so much. I felt like it had this sense of place, and it immersed you in that in a way that I didn't feel as impatient.
Did it immerse you in that? Please, more shots of the door shutting. Thank you. More shots of the town. Thank you. Sharp Objects, guys. Sorry. Should we move on to the next thing? This is actually shorter. Imagine dying over and over again, only to repeat the same night. Personally, that sounds like hell. But Natasha Lyonne, Amy Poehler, and Leslie Headland turned that idea into a smart, funny show. And best of all, each episode is only 30 minutes. Roll the trailer for Netflix's Russian Doll.
Are you going to tell me what's going on?
I keep dying and reliving the same night.
Does it hurt?
Yes.
You seem fine.
I'm not fine. I'm questioning my own sanity. We gotta take the fire escape.
I have a fire escape? I have to change my Airbnb listing then.
What was wrong with the stairs?
It's a long story involving multiple deaths.
Yeah, this is much safer.
I never lasted this long. Those things are a menace.
This show's so much fun. Yeah. And Natasha Lyonne is such a star. She's totally her own person and a very unique star, but there is a reason in 1997, Tamara Jenkins was like, you are the star of Slums of Beverly Hills, and why she was put in movies then.
I'm so glad that she got both to kind of help create a program like this, but also to get this kind of role, because I love her, and also she had such a kind of interesting up and down of a career where she went through a kind of a lot of personal stuff, and I just
a real down,
I know, and I love seeing this kind of comeback for her.
And one of the directors she directed at least one episode is Jamie Babbitt, who directed her in But I'm a Cheerleader, which I thought was kind of a nice, nice callback. I actually love this show as a contrast to what you were saying about strong female characters in Miss Bala and faking it. This character she plays is so great because she's kind of a mess, but in a realistic way. She's also very smart and is really, tries to be a good friend and a good person. And it's Groundhog Day idea where she's just waking up in the same place over and over. She dies, she comes back, and she can't figure out why. But it's not, the Bill Murray thing was he's a terrible person and he needs to learn to be a good person. She's not a terrible person, but she has issues to work through. And the show is about her working through these issues and in a very real way, and not changing who she is, but kind of coming to terms with trauma and mistakes that she's made. And it's funny, but it's also pretty dark. It's much more like a Philip K. Dick sort of rabbit hole than I expected.
I think you pinpoint something that I really liked about this as well, which is that it's not too much of anything, yet somehow still works. She's not too much of a mess, which is I feel like we had this period of time in movies and TV where it was okay, we've put women on the pedestal for too long. Now every woman has to be a horrible mess who's really mean to everybody. And you're kind of okay, but that's not realistic either. And we're finally starting to see these depictions of complex three-dimensional women, and this is a really great depiction of that. And even though she has this thing that she has to work out, a la Bill Murray, it's not that she is awful to everybody. It's that like most people, she has issues that she has to work out, and it's very much about trauma without being the victim as well.
Yeah, I have to say I'm also a huge fan of the Groundhog Day device being used.
I was so excited about that. I was this should just be a genre.
Have you seen Happy Death Day?
Yeah.
I loved Happy Death Day. Kind of to use the slasher movie, but use that device as well. I think it can be. It has to be clever to pull it off, but I do think there's so much space there for actually fun storytelling.
It's true. It's surprising how well it's worked, because Edge of Tomorrow was like that. There have been a bunch in recent years. That movie Before I Fall was a YA kind of take on it. But they all did something. They all did something really different with that same idea. And I think it's also a video game idea, right? That you die and come back.
And respawn. Yeah.
So I think maybe that's.
Doesn't her character work in video games?
She does.
In this?
Yes. So I think I think we are going to kind of see it become a genre, because that's an idea that's so implanted in our brains right now.
I also say one of the things that's so clever about this show, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything, is that the setup itself feels like there's only enough material for one season or for like a limited series event. But they find a way near the end of this first season to present new ideas that could lead to multiple seasons going forward. And it doesn't feel cheap, and it doesn't feel like they're just trying to do it so that they can prolong the show. It feels like they had really smart ideas from the beginning about how to make a long-lasting show that still revolved around a kind of Groundhog Day idea, which seems really hard to me. Imagine 5 seasons of this.
And the episodes are 25 minutes. It's so great.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things with like the era of streaming has been this kind of loss of people knowing how to make an episode, because sometimes things just end because you can just watch the next one. There's like less of this need to kind of build a kind of installments. And it's really been nice in that time to see shows still know how to do it, because when you do watch a show that is good at it, you're like, I've missed this a lot.
And it's why I still kind of stand for HBO, because HBO, for the most part, throughout this, I would say, with the exception of Sharp Objects, for the most part, has still been very good at doing shows that have, full season arcs, but are very committed to episode by episode being entertaining and telling one story. Barry has a very clear full season arc, but every episode of Barry was one story for the most part, with very clear setups and payoffs. And the same goes for Succession and a number of their other shows. So many of the streaming shows, you're like, what was that episode even for? Just to get me to watch the next episode? Yeah. Especially their dramas, I think. Yeah. Okay, out on Hulu now is Down, the newest episode of Blumhouse's series Into the Dark. It centers around 2 people who start to lose their sanity when they're trapped in an elevator for several days. Let's take a look.
There has to be security guards. Where are they?
We're locked in this box, but we're still a million miles apart.
I'm an extremely private person. You don't even know me.
We'll be fine, because we're honest with each other.
We've been in here for days. Get me out of here, please.
This any good?
Okay. So Into the Dark is this series of films on Hulu, and they're all about 80 to 90 minutes long, and they're all tied to holidays, and they're all horror films. And none of them are like amazing, but what I really like about this, I really like this series, and what I like about it is it's got this kind of high concept, low budget thing that I'm just a sucker for, like the original Twilight Zone, where you're like, let's make an emotionally affecting time travel story with 2 people in a pool table and it's 20 minutes long. Like, I love that stuff. And that's really like, this is about 2 people in an elevator, and it's like a fun, twisty horror film on like no budget. It's not 2 hours long. I find them really fun.
Yeah, and I feel like this is not the first anthology series that Hulu has made. They also had like that kind of sci-fi-ish one as well, of like standalone episodes. I feel like I like the idea of the series more than I've liked any installment so far, but I've liked that they've brought a lot of kind of interesting up-and-coming horror filmmakers, people who are good at working with like high-concept stuff. It's like Sophia Takal, I think, did the last one, and it was kind of reminiscent of a movie she'd made before. I feel like all of them are too long. I do feel like it should be like hour-long episodes, because even with this one, there was a point where I was looking down and just being like, I feel like, how much more is it going to kind of like figure out another
and
twist?
why not? Like, why does it have to be feature length?
Honestly, I'm
what
not
does
sure.
time even matter anymore?
I'm not
I mean,
sure.
I know that's I don't mean it that way, but
It's they're long for TV and they're short for movies. And I actually think that's why the series hasn't gotten more traction, because it's weird. It's like, here's a movie, but it's also a TV show, but it's a movie. But like, as like an enjoyable movie to just like put on and like be, have just enough engagement with, like, I don't know. I find them kind of weirdly relaxing.
Yeah, I can see that. And, like this one was directed by, I think this is like Daniel Stamm, who did
Last Exorcism.
Yeah, like, who, I think he's got some like talent. He's dealing with this like obviously extremely limited space, though I will have to say, like, as elevators go, it'd be an enormous elevator. Like the studio they shot in.
It's a big building.
It's a big building, yeah. But I think like it kind of like it's good with kind of like pacing out the reveals and like kind of like making you wonder how they're going to pull off doing something in that space for that long.
Yes.
I did think of, was the M. Night Shyamalan written
Devil?
Yes, Devil. And it's different very much, but I'm like in the growing genre of elevator horror. You know, it's like this is a solid installment.
We've got a great elevator horror movie that we're developing, guys. You know, part of that, part of that genre.
Yeah. It's really gonna overturn all the cliches of elevator horror.
Escalator horror. That's the future.
Oh, yeah, we already had that, I think, in 2015 when Trump came down the escalator and announced his candidacy. Oh, what's everyone's top pick of the week?
Oh God, I don't know. This is not. This is not. I would say like a great week. I'm gonna go with Russian Doll, which mostly I've just been like looking forward to watching. Solaris, yes. 2019 classic, Solaris. Yeah.
Russian Doll, definitely. And I also love Velvet Buzzsaw, so I'm just gonna go ahead and recommend that for all you people trying to scratch your killer fine art itch.
I'm gonna go Russian Doll as well, and I would say Velvet Buzzsaw. Like in installments. I really don't think it works as like a feature length movie because like while I was watching it multiple times, I was like, I'm checking out of this. This is, which I guess is Netflix's thing. Like as long as they have enough gifable moments, right, they can have it there. Thanks so much for being here, you guys.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
That's all the time that we have. Big thanks to Gwynne and Alison. Give them a round of applause. And remember, if you're rooting for Tom Brady and the Patriots this Super Bowl Sunday, you are everything that's wrong with this country. Just kidding. I don't even know what football is. I'll be drinking kombucha, eating some kind of kale quinoa dinner, and catching up with some black and white foreign films, while you goons are watching guys literally break their brains for rich old white men that donate money to the RNC. And somehow Maroon 5 is still the worst part. Enjoy!